want to hear a little bit from you first on how your team is promoting diversity and inclusion in your company.
I think for us, we take more of the inclusion approach versus diversity, because diversity is a consequence of inclusion. And for us, we focus a lot on what we call conscious and unconscious bias. So we're spending a lot of time on educating people that, are you aware that you're having an internal dialogue when you're meeting someone that's different from you? And that how you're interpreting the facts in your mindset could inadvertently change the decision that you're making. And that's where most of the problems that we're realizing is different doesn't mean bad. Different just means different. But educating yourself that we all have unconscious bias. It's not a bad thing. Being aware of them, though, and working on the mechanics, the triggers, the coping mechanisms that allow you to say, okay, you know what? I have 2 curriculums. One comes from an Ivy League school, one doesn't. Is that just enough to remove a candidate? And I didn't even put religion or race into this, right? I just put school. But we do these unconscious biasness constantly. So we're really focusing on the coaching. I don't think anyone wakes up wanting to discriminate in any way, shape, or form, but we end up doing it by our internal dialogue. So again, our focus is inclusion versus diversity, and how do you make that really something part of the DNA of your managers? Because it's got to live. It can't be a movement. It can't be a fashion statement. It has to live through the fabric of the business. Because ironically, we have very diverse clients. So if you're catering to a diverse group of clients, why can't you hire a wide, diverse group of individuals? Doesn't make any sense.
So Annamaria, when we talk about gender diversity, as you sitting in a vice president role, how does gender diversity impact the culture of an entire organization?
Well, I think fundamentally it impacts how you listen and how you talk. You can have 2 diverse individuals say the same thing, but each will understand it differently, because the adjectives and the connotations that we put behind language is different. And I tend to run a diverse group of individuals, but they are still very heavily male, and I'll tend to often stop in a conversation and ask them, what do you mean by that? They'll use vocabulary that I'm already starting on a tangent. Oh, this is what they mean. Here's my rebuttal, only to realize I'm completely in left field. They meant something else. And I think part of that, to your point, I think is we need to slow down and not assume. We need to slow down and clarify communication. What do you mean by that? Why is that causing you to have concern? Why do you see that as riskier versus I don't see it. Can you help me understand? And when you open that kind of sort of 2-way communication, you're going to get the culture differences. Oh, well, because culturally, this is what it means to me. And it's no longer defensive. And I think that's what we have to start understanding. It is okay to talk about these things and say, well, culturally, this is what it means in my culture, but I'm open to having that dialogue with you. So I find the difficulties, if you're not aware of this, is to understand the person that's talking to you is different. But you need to understand, if you're not sure, speak up.
Ask the questions.
Ask the questions. And I'd like to think I have no shame. I don't think I know everything. In fact, God knows I don't know everything. It doesn't make me weaker. I find the fact that I constantly am asking for clarity slows me down, slows my assumptions, slows down my biases, and it actually allows the other person to be more engaged. And I do get deeper relationships at the end of the day.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, when you were talking about the bottom line of the organization, what are some of the thoughts coming from National Bank?
If you look at economics is about taking a great idea, maximizing it, making it a business around it. Now, today, if you look at all the great kind of sort of surprises that have affected the businesses, they've never been standard profiles that you find. All we're saying in inclusion is that it shouldn't always just look like it should be a white man. There is that same unique person in women, in every other race. It does have an impact on your bottom line, because that creativity that you're tapping in, if everyone thinks the same, you're painting with one color. At the end of the day, it's great the first day. By the second day, you're starting to not like that color. You're not opening yourself up to what's out there. Why does it affect the bottom line? Because we're in now a business where, let's be honest, technology is making things a lot more harder. 100%. So if everyone has the same technology going forward, the number one factor that is going to differentiate us from anyone is people. So if you don't have a wide, diverse group of individuals providing you that feedback, that dialogue, the challenge, no, I don't think that's right. I don't think this is appropriate. That gives you different perspectives. And I'm not saying you don't get that by just having only, you get more of it when you have inclusive mentalities. At the end of the day, you become more competitive. If you are more competitive, it does have an impact on market share. It does have an impact on your bottom line. And I think companies where you see the natural inclusions across the levels, to your point, I do think at the beginning sometimes you have to mandate it, because status quo is a very difficult beast to change. So if you're not mandated, it's like that heart attack, right? You know you have to lose weight, but some people need the heart attack to start to change their life. I think our industry needs a little bit of a push to get it going. Do I think we need to be severe? Probably not, but it's hard to choose. So if we're thinking economics, because I'm a publicly traded company, we have responsibilities to our shareholders, we have responsibilities to our clients, we have a responsibility to our employees. Those are the three things that guide a publicly traded company. At the end of the day, if you're not inclusive, one of those three is not going to be happy. And that means you're not going to economically grow. And there's a lot of studies on that.
We see a lot of numbers around even just like regulators trying to promote women on boards and have certain numbers. And is that something you're seeing? Is there any metrics?
Absolutely. And we've done, I'm actually on quite a few of those committees and a few of those projects where we fundamentally have started saying to ourselves, okay, at every different level, in big institutions, we have levels, we call them different names. We are consciously aware of, again, visible minority and women. Like we try to look, we have many other variables, but if we take the two biggest ones, we'll break it down per company. We've now instituted that women that have high potentials that could become executives should be put in a pool and should be encouraged by other managers to be interviewed. So HR, we call them employee experience in our firm. They actually strongly encourage managers to widen the scope, even though that person doesn't fit the traditional profiles, interview them. Deal with your unconscious bias. So we're doing many of those things. I would say to you, and it's also understanding that it is a numbers game. If you put more people into the pot, eventually, the cream does kind of sort of go up. I did an exercise myself where I was referred someone internally, someone internally strongly referred me this individual. I was replacing one of my execs, and I had two great candidates. And I just said, I don't want to make this about gender. I really don't want to make it about gender because I abhor being chosen as a woman. I want to be chosen as a leader. I'm an exec. So what I did is I went to the psychologist. You have those psychometrics exams, got the results, hid the names, and I showed the results on a piece of paper. And I just went to everyone and I said, based on these two, who'd you pick? So everyone put an X on it. And then I just peeled off the name, and it was her. Why did I do that? Well, I wanted her to be able to say she didn't get chosen because she was a woman, but you were put in the pot because I wanted to have diversity. So it's a bit of both, right? It's one of those, you have to make the effort to put people into the pool. You have to train people to not apply biases to that process. And then you let the system work because there are an amazing amount of great talent. One of the things I don't like hearing, and it bothers me a lot, is I often hear there's not enough women. I disagree. There are. It's because they just don't fit, they don't look or think or act in the way that you are accustomed into wanting to see a leader. We're just different. We'll use different jokes. We'll dress differently. We might act a little differently. The end result, though, is can we have an impact to the team that we're leading? Can we have an impact to the bottom line? Can we make the system better? Exactly. Those are the questions we should be asking.
An interesting data point that I recently read when I was doing another panel was that men, if they see a job posting, if they have 60% of the qualifications, they'll apply, and women need 100 when they check it off. So I think it's interesting how you point out that maybe put people forward that might not think that they are qualified as well.
But it's internal dialogue, right? Part of that is I often say it back, it's nurturing. If you go back history in time, we would put little boys into sports and we'd say, go get it, go do it. And women or little girls were kind of sort of kept to tasks that required a lot of details, right? So, clean. Well, these are perfection details kind of sort of hobbies. So eventually you're only going to feel comfortable in doing something when you've controlled it. Whereas in sports, it's nothing but trial and error. we've seen now through the last 10, 20, 30 years, you see an amalgamation where it's no longer just boys that do sports. So you're seeing now the conditioning, but this takes time. So we have to be aware that sometimes our own internal dialogue of confidence is not there. So I tend to reframe, and I tend to often say to people, what's your downside? Well, I don't have all the qualifications. Fantastic. What's your downside? They don't take you. They weren't going to take you anyways because you weren't applying.
That's right.
So when you start telling people your internal dialogue is inhibiting your ability to illustrate the greatness of that you are, deal with that, because that you control. You don't control who chooses, because that at the end of the day, fit. It could be a variety of elements. So to your point, is it as easy as we don't apply, or is it just because the conditioning over time has led us to believe that we have to be of a certain level to do it? So it's a bit of both, right? But if you have good leadership that spots those little pushes and you apply them, right? It could be training, it could be coaching, it could be mentorship, it could be programs, it could be a variety of things. Then you are changing status quo. Because then people, not just women, people will apply.
You're a VP now, but when you first came in, whether it was straight from university or midway through your career, this conversation probably wasn't happening as much as today, or if at all. And I'm just wondering if you can give a bit of discussion around what challenges you faced back then.
It's ironic. I tend to often say I was a unicorn then, I'm a unicorn now. But the reality that I think when I was younger is I didn't know any better. And that did save me a lot. Because I look back and I go, oh my God, I must have been intolerable to deal with. Because I just tried everything. And I also didn't limit myself. So to the point though, I knew there were biases, but I just plowed ahead. And to your point though, I am blessed to have had a career where I lucked out. I can tell you that there are two great leaders that I worked for two other companies prior. Again, National Bank's fantastic, they've nurtured me. But when you talk about my youth, I did spend it elsewhere. They fundamentally never saw me anything other than Annamaria. And if you had to ask them how to define me, they would never have said she's Italian background, she's a young woman. They would always say, well, it's Annamaria. So I never kind of sort of grew up. I actually thought I was weird because I was Annamaria, not because I didn't look and feel like anybody else. So the fact that I didn't know any better allowed me to just try. Looking back now, I'm like, wow, I lucked out because I did have great leaders. But I lucked out because I also stuck with the values. See, none of these leaders had a different value system than mine. So to do good, to do the right thing, those were very important things. They listened. If I would raise my hand in a meeting, the meeting would get stopped and say, Annamaria has something to say. What do you have to bring to the table? But what that meant though is then I had a responsibility. So if I'm going to raise my hand and I want to bring something to the table, think. Bring value. Don't just talk to bring attention to yourself, but can you bring something to the table? Even though I was always disrupting, it was always, there's a blind spot. Are you aware? And if someone says we are aware, perfect. I've done my job. I brought them something to the table. So many people would say, Annamaria challenges status quo, but it's always for the greater good of the system. Looking back today, I can say it was difficult, but when you're in it, it's normal. I think I wish I would have had more opportunities.
Did you jump on opportunities that you knew you maybe weren't qualified for, or did you take those chances?
Absolutely, but it has to do with my nurturing for the simple reason that I've been in sports. I've trained some sports serious enough that I was looking to do the Olympics. I have parents that were immigrants to Canada, highly educated parents. Their education wasn't recognized, so failure was not an option, but nor was status quo. So if it doesn't come to you, I was brought to you go to it. So I remember applying, this is the old days, guys. I applied to 50 institutions and I brought 50 papers. I literally went to everyone. And I just remember I got one job out of that. Today, when you mention that to many people, they'll be like, really, you didn't give up? I'm like, well, I didn't have a choice. I didn't have a job. And same thing with education. I look back, I lucked out because the education, I have a CFA and I have an executive MBA, but many of these educations weren't things I mapped out. I hung out with people that were similar in nature in profiles. go-getters, wanted to succeed. I didn't see them as different. And I, by default, kind of sort of tacked on to them. So what they were doing, I did, not because I wanted to be different as a woman. I just wanted to be perceived. Like I did my CFA for only reason is to just so people figured out I was smart. So you sit there going, many of these things, when you add them, right, it's like a layer every time to your persona. And to the point is, where inclusion is difficult is if you've checked up all these things like everybody else, I should have had 3 times more opportunities. And that's the part that there's days when you're having a bad day, you're like, I don't want women to have to go through that. If you checked all these boxes like everybody else has, you should have the exact and equal amount of opportunity. You deserve that.
Right.
And that's the way the market should be. We were talking about bottom line. Statistically, in a relationship, right? If an advisor's kind of sort of developed and deepened their relationship with let's say the husband.
That's right.
80% of them, when the husband is no longer in the picture, lose
That's
the wife, the widow.
That's right.
So you sit there going, mathematically, it is a numbers game. So you are paid very well to listen.
That's exactly it. So
And we need to start, like to your point though, we just need to be aware that we're listening to what we want to hear. I love doing that too. But at the end of the day, we're in roles where we are playing a part. And that part is to fully understand the full household. Not just the person that likes to, or is making the decisions, or is giving the impression of making decisions. If there are 2 parties involved, ask the other party, have you understood what I said? If you can you explain it to me back in layman terms? See, that's the interesting part where today the numbers are going to get changed from the bottom because clients are making different decisions. Now, what I say to people is we shouldn't do reverse racism. You don't choose someone just because they look like you. Do they have that skill set that makes them not a ruinous empathy, but it makes them empathic to understanding your system? Because remember, we're in a financial community, so we provide services to better service our clients. If we're not listening to our clients, how can we provide that service? But if the clients also are not communicating or doing wise choices, that's where it fails. So I think the more people come in, and I think today, the more inclusive that pool of talent is, that's when we're going to see the healthy competition happen.
Ray, what's your experience with mentorship throughout your career?
Well, my personal career, I think it's been more coaching than mentorship. Because I kind of sort of, there's not one person that I would say I would want to emulate that person. Like I said, I have my own profile, I have my own personality, and I was lucky to know what that was at a young age. What I wanted to learn was different facets. So as much as the good and the bad, just to be clear, I've actually learned probably more from managers that I didn't want to emulate than I did from those that I did. And I think it's fostering an environment that's educative regardless of diversity. And I think part of what we're doing as well within our firm is the firm has invested heavily in different levels of coaching. There's individual personalized coaching if you so want it yourself because you want to change your leadership, you want to be more kind of sort of different. We have that investment in our people. We've also developed communities. I know informally I coach about 13 individuals. I actually don't say women. I actually say there's 13 individuals that I coach on my own time. Try to get, and I'm there more for when they need me. I had this situation, what do you think? And I'm always playing the devil's advocate role. We've also fostered environments where we are now pairing certain leaders with certain, young aspiring women. We're actually commingling them in a mentorship program. We've started at National Bank Financial, we started a mentorship program with universities. This has been one of our banner years where we've had a few hundred people apply to be mentors. And actually I got a student that's in finance and wants to be mentored. So this is something that I'll carve out time on a monthly basis to help. It's really about education. It really is about building confidence, asking the right questions. We're even entertaining, in the new year, we're going to be launching a big conference dedicated to educating women. Not for a sales pitch, not for anything other than these are the things you need to learn about investments. Because at the end of the day, when you think about it, when do any of us learn anything about finance in school?
No one.
And you brought up the point where women tend not to want to ask the questions.
Absolutely.
And to your point, when they're sitting in front of whether it's a male or female advisor, they might not feel comfortable.
And it's okay. Like I often say to people, you know, if you're in a relationship, you're gonna split topics. I don't want to know anything about cars. I like driving them. I don't want to know how a car is made. I don't care what the horsepower is. I just want to know how fast it gets me to where I want to go. I love cars, just not in the details that my husband does. So if someone wants to regale me with stories, I'll say, wait, let me just go get him. Because he makes a really great audience. When it comes for finance, he will inadvertently say, go talk to her. She does this all the time. So it is not wrong to say that inadvertently over time, you develop sort of like, I'm the expert on this topic and you're not. The problem though is when we're talking about retirement, financial healthiness, in a relationship of yourself, you can't 100% delegate that away.
No, you have to keep the other person in the loop.
And that's, I think, where we went wrong over time. We went in as a relationship, but then one person owned all the information, felt comfortable, built that ease of asking questions. And a lot of times, you're right, we don't ask the questions for fear of disrupting, not looking intelligent. These are things that we're imposing on ourselves.
Yeah, and we also have to create that culture where if you're asking a question, you don't look dumb or you're not made to feel like
Well, if he inadvertently, I ask you a question and he doesn't make me feel well,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have the right to get up and leave. I have that power. As a client
But I
today,
haven't done that.
absolutely. But that's what I'm trying to educate to people is you have the power
That's right.
to stand up and leave. And that is the economics of every business should be worried about that. Because if we don't do this well, the power resides there.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be listeners. We have to do all these things right.
Right. So Annamaria, Dwayne brought up wholesalers. And you know, I've written on wholesalers. It's and some of the past, let's just say, culture that's been around that male dominant environment. And a lot of the things we've heard is even the functions that they've had, it's really been catered, golf trips and parties and after hour events that happen. So for you, you know, leading a group of wholesalers, you know, how has that changed? Like how do you manage that group?
Well, I used to be a wholesaler as well. And the ironic thing, I think the key to my success is I wasn't going to out-drink anyone. I don't drink, so right off the bat, that took me out of the game. I play a decent golf game, but it's not my forte. What's happening in the industry now is even what we used to do to attract attention to is coming under scrutiny, either from a regulatory perspective, but it's also people, right? Like we used to have an industry where it was okay for a lot of advisors to take time after work to do all these things. Now you're starting to see family come into the picture. I can tell you the diversity of activity that a lot of our wholesalers do is really ironic. Like now we're doing a lot more family functions. We're doing shows. Things that you never would have seen in the expenses, right? You would have seen predominantly hockey, basketball. You guys have basketball here, so it's great. In Montreal, we don't have basketball. What you're starting to see is inadvertently, the salespeople are the quickest to adapt to being attuned to what the audience wants. And as diversity kind of sort of, you know, percolates all its way up, you're starting to see, well, maybe we could do different things. For sure, we're still doing the occasional, you'll still have events where it's predominantly, we tend to call them very male activities, even though some of them I actually like doing, but you'll see a fishing trip, right? You'll see some of these activities, but it's diminishing, not because they're bad, it's just that because you're attracting a whole other group of people. And by default, that's good. That is actually good. Our point is to garner attention. Well, you do these activities because you want to endear yourself. You want to learn more about these people. You want to get to know them. I was known as the girl that would invest heavily in all the smallest shows in Montreal. I worked for a different firm at the time. I had a very, 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 very small budget. And I liked shows. So I would invite the spouses. Inadvertently, I would always try to take my top 10 every quarter. I would have advisors call me and go, my wife wants to know where we're going next quarter. And I'm like, okay, that wasn't the intent of it. But all of a sudden, I became the person that was enmeshed in their kind of sort of relationship. I wasn't viewed just as a fun supplier. I was viewed as, oh, Annamaria's really nice. you got to give her business because we like hanging out. And she introduces us to amazing things in Montreal that we never would have seen had she not done it. That was me 20 years ago. So now others are doing that. And you're seeing more of that. So again, I think change is coming, to your point. I'd like it to go just a little bit faster. It's just again, to be fair, I'm an equalitarian. I have a son and 2 daughters, so I have to be always in the middle. But my point is, I just want the equal opportunity. And I think as wholesalers adapt to the inclusion of different advisors, so will the activities.
For women entering the industry, young women entering the industry right now, what would you say to them? What's some advice that you could give them?
I feel for them because they're hearing a lot of the negativity of what was. So my first recommendation I often say to women is don't assume. Don't assume that everything you're hearing is negative. Don't assume it's bad, because it's not. There is a change occurring today, and I do sympathize with my male counterparts. Sometimes they don't know which way to go. So I often say to women, don't assume. If you're not sure, ask for clarity. But arm yourself with being the clear choice. Anything I applied to, I went in knowing I was going to get it. Doesn't mean I got it. But I went in going, everything that needs to be delivered on that table, I control. So did I network? Do I have my references? Do I have the education? Do I have the academia checked out? Do I have the work experiences? Did I do what needs to get done? And I say life is not just easy about saying, oh, I'm being discriminated because. There are other things that you have to deliver. So don't assume, ask for clarity, and work on yourself. There's so many things today. There's so much investment being done there. Take advantage of it. I wish I had a tenth of some of the coaching and the mentorship that we had. Probably would have made way less mistakes than I did right now. And that's the beauty about hindsight. Because hindsight allows you to say, can I learn from someone else's experience? Make my journey smoother despite yours being bumpy. And that's when we know society's moving forward. Because you're taking sort of like, you look at the past, I don't think it was bad. I just don't think it was fantastically great if you were different. And for women today, you have the ear. But be ready to deliver.
And Annamaria, your final thoughts?
Absolutely. I think I am actually very empathic towards men. It is not easy because they're hearing all this noise. I want them to feel that reverse racism is just as bad. So to your point, build on yourself, but don't build the buddy system. Like that, I think we've made it clear. The message is loud and clear. I think everyone's kind of sort of said that should die. It really should be about, capabilities, capacity, personality fit, like all of the important soft skills as well as the hard skills. And say to yourself, just be aware of your surroundings. A lot of times, it's the little things that we sometimes take for granted that we don't realize that we're rubbing or creating a friction point. If you can build on that awareness, then you're on an equal footing with everybody else.